What exactly can a young girl do to have more admirers?
As simple as it may sound, everything starts with appearance. Because at first, before a man can see any deeper sides of your personality or character, a man always looks at you visually first. So, if we're talking about a girl who wants to attract more male attention and eventually be able to choose for herself, one worthy man with whom she will build a marriage and a serious relationship, then the first thing to start with is appearance. Because you might be incredibly interesting, you might be super deep, you might have read a ton of books, you might have an extraordinary mind. But if, for example, you don't pay much attention to your appearance, then the number of men who notice you will be smaller. If we're talking about the next practical things, it's ease in communication and a certain openness to conversation, a certain sense of humor. Here, some girls think that this means they have to take the initiative themselves somehow. No, it means that when we see, for example, a girl and we like her visually, if we make eye contact with her and she, for instance, smiles at us, or if she is, in general, open to getting to know her, to starting a conversation with her, then it makes things easier for the man. The moment of introduction, because when we talk about a man, he might be interesting, smart, experienced, he might earn good money, but none of that means he knows how to approach and introduce himself or that it comes easily to him. Because a lot of men have faced this in their lives with the fact that they would approach and try to introduce themselves, but it didn't feel very pleasant for them. And that's why, for example, when a man sees a girl and she smiles at him, or she might ask some totally simple but open question, anything at all, like asking what time it is or how to get somewhere, anything really. It can just be any kind of communication. That really makes things a lot easier for the man. This whole moment of getting acquainted him. And if we're talking about this third significant point, then here, when we start communicating with a new woman and it's our very first time getting to know her better, it's absolutely important for us to understand whether she's truly open to a relationship with us, whether she's genuinely interested, and whether this is actually a very important and relevant topic in her life right now. And so, for example, if during the first conversation, a girl might carefully mention that she doesn't have any relationships at the moment. Yeah, or that she's generally single. And that also gives a guy a certain confidence because very often it happens that some girls want to play a little game to say something like, "Oh, I have a boyfriend," or to act a bit ambiguously like, "Well, you figure it out yourself." And usually this actually works against them, so to speak. It has the opposite effect. And so, if we're talking about starting this kind of communication in general, about making a first impression, then these things are important. And always remember that. As soon as people meet, they'll immediately check each other's Instagram pages, find each other on Facebook. That's why it's also important, maybe, to remove certain things from there. Thank you. Some things might be perceived ambiguously. Because, for example, some girls who have a nice figure want, so to speak, to show it off to the whole world. But a man with serious intentions, if he sees a lot of your photos in swimsuits, it might bother him more than, so to speak, encourage him toward a serious relationship. Because when a girl, well, what she tries to catch, so to speak, that's what she'll end up catching. If the main reason and motivation for a man to message a girl is that she has a nice butt or her hips are incredibly beautiful, then it's unlikely we're talking about serious, deep relationships for the future. We can say that this might be something superficial just for fun or for some sexual gratification. But the man might not be interested in anything serious at all if right away he only notices, so to speak, all these feminine features. Yes, to put it nicely. Exactly. There you go.
You just mentioned that it's important for a man to see the seriousness in a woman, that she's, so to speak, ready for a serious relationship. And at the same time, this kind of behavior actually pushes him away. What are some other reasons why certain individuals fall in love with specific women and begin actively envisioning a family and a future with them, while others are simply viewed as temporary companions for fun?
When a woman starts off by seducing a man, she immediately sees a guy she likes, thinks, that's the one, and jumps right into this game. Because she already knows that if she touches him, if she gets close to him, if she says, you're so handsome, in other words, if she immediately gets involved in the process of seducing him, even if he has serious intentions toward her, and even if he really enjoys the whole sexual game, you have to understand that this immediately shifts everything, so to speak, into a purely sexual direction. I think it's much wiser to first get to know the person, their values, and to start with friendship. So, for example, if a girl, instead of jumping straight into the seduction process, she chooses to be a friend first, that's a completely different scenario. If she starts asking certain questions, like she asks the man what he's interested in, what he does, what his dreams and hobbies are, what he wants out of life. So when this process kicks in, when she starts to learn about his world, first of all, he might actually enjoy sharing because a lot of people love talking about themselves and things related to them. And that's why when we start by genuinely showing interest in another person, asking certain questions, and of course, sharing something about ourselves too, it's a dialogue, not a monologue. But taking everything into account, the man slowly begins to open up more around her, and she thoughtfully responds to his answers. Because I remember when my wife and I first met and started talking, she asked me a lot of different questions. And when I answered those questions about myself, about my future, my vision, my goals, about what I do, I really liked how she responded to all that. I could see that she was interested, that it resonated with her. The values I was expressing, the things I was saying, I saw that we were syncing up on the level of ideas, thoughts, and our vision for the future. So that was the main trigger for me. We didn't have that thing where we were seducing each other, trying to lure each other in. There really wasn't that kind of immediate attempt to ignite any sort of sexual spark between us. We even frequently joked about that situation during the first months of getting to know one another better. Like, if we also had a sexual spark, we could totally get married. But we started out as friends. So when a man is sitting right next to you and he finally opens up to you, when a man shares his deep inner world and his private inner world becomes his outer reality, you like it and you respond to it saying, yes, that resonates with me. Yes, I also want, for example, to travel a lot. Yes, I'd also like to live in my own house. Yes, I'd also like to do that kind of work. Yes, I'd like that too, to raise kids like that. Then he sees that you have a shared future. And a very important point, never do this just to please someone, because in the future, in marriage, everything always comes out. And so, if this truly reflects your values, if you and this man really connect on that level, on exactly these kinds of things, then you can honestly say, yes, this resonates with me. But if you say, oh, yeah, I love that too. Oh, yeah, I want that too. But it's not genuine, it will be felt. And that is exactly why, when you stay truly and authentically true to yourself, when you do not try to play a specific role, you do not try to act like some kind of fierce tigress who is seducing him, you do not try to be far too convenient for him or play the cold role of some kind of distant ice queen, just like that woman Anuka. Oh, wait, come on, win me over, prove that you're worthy of being with me. In other words, when you don't wear masks, when you're real, genuine, and you immediately say the things you don't like, you immediately say the things you do like. So, from the very first minutes of meeting him, you are your true self, just as you are. And this is something that a lot of people don't understand, and as a result, they end up really hurt. Their relationships become very distorted because at first they were pretending to be someone else. In other words, there was a moment when they weren't being genuine. From the very beginning, she started saying that she also loves soccer, that she likes it too, that she enjoys active recreation, that she also does. He immediately started saying that he's a super romantic, that he really wants kids, that he wants a family. And for example, both of them seemed a little bit perfect in the eyes of the other person. In other words, they put on masks, and this led to the fact that after a few years, people just break up and realize that those years were simply wasted. But if we had been honest from the start, if he had just said right away, I'm not ready for a serious relationship yet, I don't want to get married, that's it. At least that's honest. She understands. Okay, he sees girls right now more for fun, for sex, but he doesn't want to build a family. He has the right, it's his choice, okay, but I'll look for someone with whom I actually want to go through this the family marathon, so to speak, and serious relationships. And that's why when a girl, instead of playing some role and pretending, whether it's being too seductive or acting too cold and unavailable, when she just stays true to herself and broadcasts her real Wi Fi, the energy she truly has inside, that's what will create an atmosphere around her. Specifically, it will attract those men who resonate with her true inner world. But again, at first, men only look at appearance, and then, if they're interested, they continue. I have to be honest here. Friends, if you want to dive even deeper into the topic of relationships, to learn how to build them properly, to choose your beloved, to navigate different crises and challenging moments together, to properly separate from your parents, to make wise decisions on your own, to learn how to listen to and respect another person, to show unconditional respect and unconditional love. If you want to learn how to build covenant relationships, and instead of killing everything with your sense of justice or destroying your relationship with nitpicking and criticism, if you want to learn how to communicate so that your beloved hears you, understands you, loves you, and you have peace and harmony, I invite you to join our school to take the course called Relationships from A to Z. And we have this course available. It's recorded, you can watch it, and you can find information about it below this video. Just write to the administrators and you'll be added to the course. And now let's get back to the podcast.
I've heard this a lot from women who are already married, who already have a lot of experience, whether they're my friends or much older than me. These women would say, a woman should be like this, like that, gentle, kind, open, easygoing. And to some extent, I realize that in many ways, that's just not me, and I'm not like that. Could you please tell me, in your opinion, what are those personal qualities in women that make them more highly attractive to men, and which ones can be developed within yourself?
In my personal view, the single most essential thing for a man, in my opinion, is when a woman graciously permits him to be himself and absolutely refrains from interfering with his freedom of will. When a woman comes into a man's life and tries to impose her own sense of order, telling him things like, don't do this sort of thing anymore, or come on, this particular project is never going to work out, or this job, well, listen, come on, you don't really need to wear that. You definitely need to rearrange all these things at home. You really should see that for yourself. So, when a woman starts actively interfering with a man's free will, there are men who might even like it because they've just come out from under their grandmother's or mother's skirt, and for them, it's a familiar situation when a woman is in charge. But when we're talking about a strong man with a solid inner core, for him, this situation is unacceptable. And that's why, when we as men try to build the world around us, first our inner world, then we take care of the people around us, of ourselves. We look after our home, our car, our job, all sorts of things. It's important for us to maintain a certain level of autonomy. And when a woman understands this, when a girl understands this, that instead of just picking some more or less suitable man and then trying to mold him into something, then he'll be the head and I'll be the neck, constantly steering him in the right direction. Instead, most people can't pull this off. Most men don't change, and most women don't change either. And that's why, instead of playing this very thankless game, it's much better to choose from the very beginning a man whose reality and inner world you genuinely like right away. And you want to become a part of his world, and he becomes a part of yours. And so, when instead of trying to somehow influence his free will, trying to somehow manipulate him, steer him, do something to get him to go where you want him to go. Instead of that, stay true to yourself and let him do the things he wants to do, the way he wants to do them, so that he can build his own reality. If he sees you as part of that reality in the future, he'll invite you in. He'll say, I want you to be my wife. Please be my wife. That is, he'll propose because he wants to start building that future reality together with you. But if he feels pressure from you, if he starts to feel like you're becoming an older sister to him, or in some roles a mother, in some roles a maid, in some roles a nanny, in some roles a mentor, a guide, then for a man who has an inner core, this will be an unacceptable situation, and such a relationship is not viable. If you, as a woman, want to attract a lot of male attention around you, and you want it to be, so to speak, quality attention, and you want to have many admirers, while also being able to choose a worthy future husband, do not interfere with a man's free will. You should never attempt to change him, because when you try to subtle and gently control him in any specific manner or fashion, you inevitably begin to move away from your natural role of his beloved girlfriend, his beloved, his potential future wife. You move into a different role and you won't like being in that role. Even if in the moment he agrees to everything and says, oh, you know better, of course you can guide me. Oh, I can always consult with you. I really like it. Oh, what do you think? Oh, however you say, that's what I'll do. So even if at first you manage to completely control him, or at least control one aspect of him, believe me, after 2, 4, or 10 years of married life, you won't be thrilled with this role. Because my consultations are packed with women who, at some point, started, so to speak, gently guiding their husbands. He didn't mind, but after 10 to 15 years of this process, they come and ask, what can I do to turn his ambitions back on so that he starts being the number one in the family? And sometimes it can take us several months to get out of this state. And it's a very difficult and traumatic process, but it's necessary. So, from the very beginning, choose a man whose world you already like, and don't try to control that world. If he feels free around you, you'll be that rare girl for him, the one with plenty of air to breathe. Because a lot of girls, when they start a serious relationship and things get serious for them, they subconsciously start to take away that air. They start to suck a little bit of air out of the room with their jealousy and control. You have to do this, don't do that. I want to see you here. Take this off, put that on. Don't get into this, don't get into that cryptocurrency. Stay away from this, from that. And that's why, if you remain free and he remains free in front of you, it will be a very powerful investment. Your future relationship.
I've actually heard this phrase quite often, that men are afraid of strong women, that men are afraid. Smart women are generally afraid of women. If that's already happening to you, well, that's a joke. Is this saying really relevant today, and what is it actually about? Is it really that men are afraid of strong women?
I think that in principle, a man can't really be afraid of a person. Well, with some women, it might just be difficult for him, and with others, he'll feel more comfortable. So there are, so to speak, three categories of women. People really don't like it when I start classifying, but it's important to me that people at least understand the three groups you can belong to. There are very accommodating women, the kind you can basically use however you want. They adapt to everything, and that's a tragedy in their lives. Then there's the leader type woman who is like, wow, really strong. She says, I'll do everything my way. I'm raising the kids here. We're doing things like this. Everything goes my way. And then there's the wiser one. And if we're talking about a normal man with a good character and proper values, if he meets a woman who's too accommodating, who just looks up to him, sees him as some kind of idol, he realizes it would take me a long time and a lot of effort to pull you out of that state. And honestly, I don't really want to deal with that. When he meets a woman who's a leader and she's like, I'm not going to change, spending years of his life on a process that might not even work, she might not change at all, so to speak, and just stay the way she is. Her masculine traits, her testosterone, she might not even tone that down, and he doesn't see any point in trying to do that either. And that's why some men, when they meet women who are either too accommodating or too aggressive, they just realize, I don't want to get involved with this at all. That's a normal process. It's the same for women. There are women who, for example, see that he's a mama's boy, or they see that he's in debt, or he's ruining his health with alcohol or something like that. I don't want to waste the best years of my life on his struggle with alcohol. Who can judge a woman for, after meeting a guy and realizing he has an alcohol addiction, just walking away from that? That's totally normal. We're free people, we can choose for ourselves who we want to build a life with, and that's why a man can do the same. So to speak, a woman whom everyone around considers to be so strong. And he can say, that's just not my cup of tea. She's nice, she's beautiful, she'll definitely be right for someone. Maybe someone will even be happy with her, but she's just not my cup of tea. And that's why, so to speak, I don't want to drink with her, at least for now. And that's why, in my opinion, men aren't really that afraid of strong women. They just don't start serious relationships with every woman because if a man is growing, he wants to see someone next to him. More or less, a girl who's on about the same level as he is. And the same goes for women. When they're growing and at a certain level, well, a woman who has a strong career, a good income, works on herself, goes to the gym, takes care of her body, her mind, her intellect, everything, she's unlikely to be with just some guy who works as a security guard somewhere in some village. She's unlikely to tie her life to him, simply because, for now, they're on different levels. They're just a bit on equal footing, and I understand that for many people, this might be a little unpleasant to hear. But that's the reality. We're all at different stages of our development, our consciousness, and that's why at these levels, we look for someone who more or less matches our own level.
Let's pause here for a moment. How important is it for men that a woman has a hobby, her own passion, or even just a job that she does with enthusiasm? Are women like that more interesting to men?
Of course, because when a woman has her own world in which she fulfills herself, so when he comes into her life, he sees that he doesn't become the center of her universe. Because a normal man with healthy self esteem, with more or less proper values, someone adequate, he will never want to be the center of the universe for his wife or his girlfriend, you know? Because that's not his role or function. Yes, he is the head of the family, and yes, he is responsible for the family. I'm more for traditional values, where the man is still the head and he makes the important strategic decisions. And that's not something the woman does so she doesn't burn out in front of him, both emotionally and physically. And that's why when a man starts a relationship with a girl and she has her own world, her own job, her hobbies, she has her girlfriends, her own interests, here she's painting, there she's dancing, he understands. She's already fulfilling herself in her own world, and that's awesome. That's cool. And if I like the reality she's building around herself, I also want to be a part of that reality. And she can look at and evaluate his world, what he's building around himself, and say, oh, I want to walk the same path with this man. I want to move forward and follow him. Because, as it seems to me, subjectively, a woman truly becomes happy when there's a strong, intelligent man by her side who isn't afraid of responsibility, who's ready to make strategic decisions, and who's willing to say, this is how I decide. I'm ready to consult with you. Let's talk about it. Your opinion matters to me. You're the most important person in the world to me. But there will be some critical moments when he has to say, this is my decision. We're moving. This is my decision. We're doing it this way. This is my decision when it comes to money. Because if a woman takes on the role of the number one, she won't be happy. And so if we're talking about her, having her own world, that's wonderful. He'll want to become a part of that world. And then, of course, he'll find it more interesting to be with her because he's not the only source of good experiences for her. She comes to him for a date, already with a smile, already happy because besides him, she has so many awesome things happening in her life.
Then I have a question for you. Where do you find a man like that? You're saying that a woman is happy when there's a strong man by your side? And I think that at least once, every woman has asked herself where to find him and why. There's always someone around me, but it's never the right one or the right kind of person. Where do you find and meet a real man?
A lot of people won't like my answer because I've noticed a certain trend. When a woman says that, there are no decent men. They're all kind of weak. Where are the real ones? Where can you meet them? Where do you find them? In the vast majority of these cases, the situation is that she's simply not focusing or working hard enough on herself. and she hasn't yet attained the necessary level of personal development where she would actually be truly captivating and interesting to those kinds of men. And it works the same way for men. A man might look around and think, oh, all they want from me is, like, just money or something. Or they just want to use me somehow. Or where are the decent women? They all try to control everything. That also shows that his level of personal development isn't very high. Because when you're truly committed to the process of developing yourself, every single connection you have with other people, they'll intuitively sense and perceive your level of intelligence, whether you respect others or not, how psychologically mature you are, and how deeply and thoroughly you understand your own boundaries and those of others. In other words, all of that will be felt. And so, when a woman says, where are all the decent men? It actually shows that she's not yet at that stage of personal development, at which those very men she wants to see by her side will start to notice her. But if you want to have, in a reasonable sense, a line of suitors waiting for you, not so you can flirt with all of them, but so you have the option to choose one truly worthy man, dive deep into working on yourself, your appearance, your figure, your mind, your habits, your character, your emotional intelligence. Work on making sure that everything around you, from how you look, to how your apartment looks, to how you speak, how clearly you speak, how well you can control your own emotions, how much you can take an interest in a man's world, how much you develop yourself as a person, as a woman, reflects your growth. If you truly start this process and stick with it, you'll be able to find a man who is doing the same thing. Because when a man works on himself, reads books, attends seminars, he's constantly growing, and there's always something happening in his work or business. So, as he grows, he starts to notice other women who are also growing. Because birds of a feather flock together, but if a woman spends her time, a girl spends her time on Instagram and TikTok watching videos. She grabs coffee with her girlfriends, does this, and just works at her job, and she says she doesn't want me to support her. Where can I meet such a strong, handsome, intelligent man who will be number one, and I will gladly be his wife, focus on my career or family or self fulfillment or friends or hobbies? Where can I meet someone like that? Yeah, when you are truly ready for such a person, they will appear in your life. Or when you're not ready, when you're not working on yourself, they won't show up. Because when you set out on this path of growth, even just by carefully observing some of your social media, a man can clearly perceive and understand, oh, this Wi Fi, the vibe she's giving off through her stories, her posts, and various other digital updates, that's something I truly want to be a part of. And so, if there aren't any worthy, so to speak, suitors around you right now, men you'd want to build a life with, in most cases, that means you're not working on yourself deeply enough. And those men who are growing and moving through life faster and more actively than you, for now, are not choosing you. I know this is an unpleasant thought. I know it's the kind of idea we'd rather run away from, but that's the only answer I have. I understand that when you're at a certain stage of personal growth, you'll look for someone who's more or less at the same level. And so, if you, as a woman, are developing yourself, you're building your own life and achieving a certain level of success, you'll never choose an outsider as your partner, and you'll never date an outsider. That's the reality of our lives. We look for a loved one who's more or less on the same level as us.